The courtroom was packed that day, but no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. A young lawyer, barely a few years out of law school, walked into Judge Judy's courtroom with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His sharp suit, carefully styled hair, and gleaming smile told the audience he was not just here to argue a case. He was here to make a name for himself. He believed he had studied enough, rehearsed enough, and memorized enough precedents to corner the most famous judge in America. What he didn't realize was that Judge Judy had seen every trick, every manipulation, and every shade of overconfidence that ever dared to step into her courtroom. What he thought would be his moment of triumph would instead become the moment that defined his career, for all the wrong reasons. It all began with a single challenge. The young lawyer believed that Judge Judy, with all her years on television and in the courtroom, was outdated. He thought he could expose her as someone who relied more on personality than on true knowledge of the law. That was his plan, to challenge her on her own territory and leave her speechless. But he underestimated something far greater than books, degrees, or quick-witted comebacks. He underestimated the power of wisdom, sharpened by decades of experience and delivered by a woman who had built her reputation on tearing arrogance to pieces. Judge Judy knew the type the moment he opened his mouth. The smirk, the tone of his voice, the way he phrased his question. It was not the posture of someone seeking justice. It was the posture of someone seeking attention. And Judge Judy had no patience for those who treated her courtroom like a stage for ego. Yet even she could not have anticipated how far he would go, or how quickly the tables would turn. The challenge came in the form of a single loaded question, one meant to paint Judge Judy as outdated, unprepared, even ignorant of modern law. It was framed carefully, designed to make her stumble. If she faltered even for a moment, the young lawyer would claim victory. Millions of viewers, he believed, would see him as the sharp young attorney who outsmarted the most famous judge on television. His career would skyrocket, his name would be etched into viral headlines, and Judge Judy would, for once, look small. But instead of stumbling, Judy did something that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. She paused. She let the silence stretch, her eyes fixed on him with the kind of focus that only comes from a lifetime of cutting through deception. For the first time, the young lawyer felt his confidence falter. And then, with surgical precision, Judge Judy delivered a response, so sharp, so devastating that the air itself seemed to leave the room. The lawyer's lips parted, ready to respond, but no words came out. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. His eyes darted across the courtroom, searching for an escape. 15 seconds. 20. By the time the silence stretched to nearly half a minute, the once cocky lawyer's composure shattered. His hands trembled, his face flushed, and his voice broke when he finally tried to speak. But it was too late. The damage had been done. By the 47th second, he was no longer the confident challenger who thought he could topple a legend. He was a young man fighting, back tears, exposed for his arrogance on national television. What were those words that Judge Judy spoke that left him in silence? What revelation turned a rising star into a humiliated cautionary tale? And why did this single exchange ripple far beyond one episode, shaking the legal community, the public, and even the young lawyer's future career? The answer lies not just in what was said, but in the truth that was hidden behind it. A truth about the law, about humility, and about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Because here's the hidden part of this story. Judge Judy didn't just answer his question. She revealed something deeper, something the young lawyer never saw coming. She exposed not only the weakness of his argument, but the weakness of his character. And once that truth was laid bare, no amount of legal training or clever phrasing could protect him. This wasn't simply a courtroom exchange. It was a battle between arrogance and experience, pride and truth. And as the cameras rolled, the world watched as arrogance crumbled in less than a minute. What you're about to discover is not just how Judge Judy won the exchange, but why it mattered. Why millions of people who saw the clip online felt something deeper than entertainment. Why the legal community itself debated for months about what happened that day. And why the lesson of that 47-second silence still echoes today. Because at its core, this story isn't just about a lawyer and a judge. It's about the danger of arrogance, the value of wisdom, and the power of truth to bring even the most confident challenger to their knees. If you think you've seen Judge Judy at her toughest, you haven't seen anything yet. Because this story doesn't just reveal her sharpest moment, it reveals the hidden truth about what happens when pride collides with principle. So before we dive into the full story, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to witness isn't just courtroom drama. It's a moment so powerful, so unforgettable, that once you've seen it, you'll never look at arrogance the same way again. The silence of that moment wasn't just about a lawyer losing his words. It was about what was truly on the line. Because this wasn't an ordinary courtroom, and this wasn't an ordinary case. For the young lawyer, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Cameras were rolling, the audience was watching, and millions would later see the clip online. He wasn't just arguing a case. He was gambling with his reputation, his credibility, and the entire trajectory of his career. If he succeeded in cornering Judge Judy, he would become the man who did the impossible, the man who made the toughest judge in America stumble. Offers for interviews, speaking engagements, even potential high-profile cases would follow. His name would be written in bold across newspapers, law blogs, and TV headlines. In his mind, this was the shortcut to greatness. But if he failed, the price would be far greater than he imagined. Because Judge Judy's courtroom isn't just a place for rulings, it's a stage where truth always has the last word. If he lost, he wouldn't just lose an argument, he would lose the very foundation of his credibility. To falter here, in front of the most respected television judge in the world, meant being branded forever as the lawyer who thought he was smarter than Judy and ended up crying instead. And Judge Judy understood the stakes better than anyone. She had seen countless attorneys come and go, each convinced their sharp tongues and legal tricks could give them the upper hand. But she also knew that every challenge in her courtroom carried weight, far beyond the walls of her set. What played out here would echo across careers, reputations, and the way the public viewed justice itself. That's what makes this confrontation different. It wasn't just about one young lawyer and one judge. It was about arrogance versus humility, showmanship versus substance, and the public's faith in the law itself. Because if a man trained in the law could not withstand the wisdom of a woman who had lived it for decades, then the question was no longer about winning or losing. It was about what the law truly means, and who gets to define it. And in this courtroom, one fact would become undeniable. Judge Judy was not just defending herself, she was defending the very heart of justice against the pride of a man who thought he could rewrite it. Long before the cameras captured his silence, the young lawyer had built his confidence on appearances. Fresh out of law school, he carried the weight of prestigious degrees and glowing recommendations. Professors had praised his quick mind, classmates admired his ability to recite legal codes word for word, and he believed that knowledge alone made him untouchable. To him, Judge Judy was just another personality on television. Sharp-tongued, yes, but surely no match for the technical brilliance of someone trained in the latest legal theories. He had studied her cases obsessively, not to learn, but to prepare his ambush. He believed he had found a weakness, a specific precedent he thought she had overlooked in the past. With that one question, carefully framed and rehearsed, he planned to prove that even a legend could be exposed. His mistake wasn't in doing the research. His mistake was in assuming knowledge without wisdom was enough. Judge Judy, on the other hand, had lived through decades of law before television ever pointed a camera at her. She had seen lawyers break down under pressure, watched liars expose themselves, and dismantled arrogance in real courtrooms long before fame found her. To her, the law wasn't just a system of rules. It was a living measure of justice, sharpened through time, experience, and instinct. When the producers welcomed the young lawyer onto her show, they saw the potential for drama. What they didn't realize was that they were placing arrogance in front of a fire that had burned for decades. And when fire meets arrogance, there is only one outcome. Pride turns to ashes. The moment the young lawyer stood before Judge Judy, the energy in the courtroom shifted. He carried himself with the posture of someone who believed he was already the victor. His shoulders squared, his chin slightly raised, his voice laced with confidence as he began to speak. For him, this wasn't a case. It was a stage. And his opening line was carefully crafted, designed not for justice but for spectacle. Your Honor, he began, his tone dripping with bravado. With all due respect, I believe the interpretation of this statute has been misapplied in your previous rulings. In fact, I can point to a precedent that directly contradicts the reasoning you've relied upon. The audience stirred. This wasn't the usual trembling or nervous tone of litigants who came before Judy. This was different. This was a young man, barely a decade into adulthood, daring to question a judge who had built her name on destroying arrogance with nothing more than facts, wit, and an unwavering command of the law. Judge Judy tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. She didn't interrupt. Not yet. She let him continue, her silence only magnifying the weight of his words. The lawyer pressed on, his voice growing bolder with each sentence. Law isn't about theatrics, Your Honor, it's about precision, and when we cling to outdated interpretations, we risk misleading not only ourselves but the public who looks to us for guidance. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown at Judy's feet. It was exactly what he wanted. A direct challenge, a moment that would position him as the sharp young mind unafraid to take on a giant. But Judy's pause was deliberate. Her silence wasn't hesitation, it was strategy. She had faced countless challengers in her life, and the ones who walked in with arrogance rarely understood the trap they were building for themselves. Finally, she leaned forward slightly, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of a lifetime in the law. Young man, she said, you seem very sure of yourself. Tell me, what precedent are you referring to? Quote it for me, word for word. The lawyer's smirk widened. He had rehearsed this moment. With perfect recall, he recited the passage, his voice crisp and commanding. He looked around the courtroom as if expecting applause, as if his memory alone was proof that he had already won. But Judy did not flinch. She waited until he finished, then asked the question that changed everything. And do you know, she said slowly, the context of that ruling? The circumstances under which it was applied, the limitations the court itself placed upon its interpretation? The lawyer blinked. For the first time, his confidence wavered. Well, the precedent speaks for itself, Your Honor. Judy's eyes sharpened. No, it does not. Law never speaks for itself. Law must always be understood in context. Otherwise, young man, you're not practicing law. You're reciting words you don't understand. A murmur rippled through the audience. The lawyer's jaw tightened, but he pressed forward, unwilling to let go of the stage. But surely, Your Honor, the plain language of the text. Stop. Judy's voice cut through the room like a blade. Plain language without comprehension is nothing more than noise. The law is not a game of memory. It is the application of reason, principle, and judgment. Do you know why I made that ruling you're so eager to criticize? The lawyer's face flushed. He stammered, searching for an answer, but Judy's relentless gaze pinned him in place. I'll tell you why, she continued, not waiting for his response. Because the circumstances demanded it. Because justice required it. And because, unlike you, I don't stand here to prove how clever I am. I stand here to ensure the truth prevails. That is the difference between you and me, counselor. You seek victory. I seek justice. The silence that followed was suffocating. The young lawyer's bravado faltered, his carefully rehearsed lines collapsing under the weight of Judy's words. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. The audience leaned in, waiting for his reply, but none came. Seconds ticked by. 5, 10. His composure cracked. His eyes darted downward, his hands trembling as if his own body had betrayed him. He wanted to speak, but Judy had exposed the weakness at the core of his challenge. He had memorized the words, but he had never understood the heart of the law, and then Judy delivered the line that crushed him completely. You may know the book, she said, her voice like steel, but I am the book. The courtroom erupted, gasps, whispers. A few stifled laughs from those who knew the truth of her statement. The young lawyer's face drained of color. His smirk was gone. His pride dissolved before millions of eyes. He stood there, silent, caught in a storm he could not escape. By the 15th second of silence, the audience felt the tension pressing on their chests. By the 30th, the lawyer's eyes glistened, his confidence broken. By the 47th, his voice cracked as he finally tried to respond. But it was too late. His tears betrayed him before he could form a single word. What had begun as his moment of triumph had turned into the most humiliating moment of his life. And Judge Judy, without raising her voice or breaking her composure, had once again proven why arrogance has no place in the courtroom. But this was only the beginning. Because what she exposed in that young lawyer was not just his ignorance. It was the truth that knowledge without wisdom collapses under the weight of experience. And the lesson that unfolded in those 47 seconds would ripple far beyond that courtroom. For a moment, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. The young lawyer's lips quivered, but no words formed. His eyes darted from Judy to the audience, then to the cameras and back again, as if searching for someone, anyone, to rescue him. But there was no lifeline, no precedent he could pull from memory, no escape route from the corner he had painted himself into. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. The silence wasn't just awkward. It was crushing. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, feeling the weight of the lawyers unraveling. Some covered their mouths, others exchanged glances, but no one dared to speak. Judge Judy didn't rush him. She didn't soften her gaze. She sat perfectly still, letting the silence speak louder than any words could. It was her courtroom, and, in that moment, the silence itself became her weapon. By the 15th second, the lawyer's bravado had evaporated completely. His hands trembled as he gripped the lectern. His shoulders hunched as though the silence itself was pressing down on him. He opened his mouth once more, but only a weak gasp escaped. At the 30th second, tears began to pool in his eyes. His chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. The confidence that had carried him into the courtroom was gone, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. The realization that he had been dismantled not by a shouting match or a barrage of counter-arguments, but by a single truth he could not deny. The audience could feel it too. The once smirking lawyer had become a symbol of arrogance humbled, of pride undone. Every second that passed wasn't just silence. It was a countdown to his collapse. And then came the 47th second. His voice cracked as he tried to speak, the tears he had fought so hard to suppress now glistening under the courtroom lights. He managed only a broken sentence. I can't. The words rang out like a confession. A confession that he couldn't answer, couldn't defend, couldn't stand against the weight of Judy's wisdom. In that moment, it wasn't just his case that was lost. It was his credibility, his composure, his very identity as the clever, young lawyer who thought he could conquer the queen of the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the room. The silence that had humiliated him was finally broken, but the damage was irreversible. Cameras zoomed in on his flushed face, the streaks of shame that no amount of legal training could hide. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice calm but unyielding. The law is not a toy, young man. It is not a script for you to memorize and perform. It is a living truth, and if you do not respect it, it will break you before the world. That is what you've just learned. The hardest way possible. Her words fell like a gavel, final and absolute. The audience erupted, some in shocked applause, others in stunned silence, but all united in the realization that they had just witnessed something unforgettable. Arrogance collapsing in under a minute. And as the lawyer lowered his head, tears streaking his cheeks, Judge Judy had not just won an argument. She had delivered a lesson that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. If this moment opened your eyes to why wisdom always conquers arrogance, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will show you just how far the fallout from these 47 seconds would reach. The silence may have lasted only 47 seconds, but its echoes spread far beyond that courtroom. What happened inside Judge Judy's chambers that day became something larger than a single case. It became a cultural moment. Within hours of the episode airing, clips began to circulate online. At first, they spread among legal forums and fan pages. But soon, the moment exploded across social media, carrying with it the raw humiliation of a young lawyer brought to tears under the weight of truth. Judy, 47. Seconds trended worldwide. Memes surfaced, commentators weighed in, and ordinary viewers replayed the footage over and over, unable to believe what they had just seen. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was a parable about arrogance undone. Every second of silence, every flicker of the lawyer's crumbling expression, became a symbol of pride meeting its end. Law students debated the confrontation in classrooms. Some defended the young lawyer, insisting he had been set up, while others argued he had learned the most valuable lesson of all. The law isn't about showing off, it's about serving justice. Professors played the clip to their students as a warning. Don't confuse knowledge with wisdom and never underestimate the power of experience. Meanwhile, Judge Judy's reputation soared even higher. For decades, she had been known as the sharp-tongued judge who tolerated no nonsense. But this moment cemented her legacy not just as a television personality, but as a figure of authority, who could expose the emptiness of arrogance without lifting her voice. She had dismantled her challenger with nothing more than patience, silence, and truth. For the young lawyer, however, the fallout was devastating. Instead of the viral fame he had imagined, he became infamous. Headlines didn't praise his courage. They mocked his collapse. The lawyer who cried in 47 seconds became the label that followed him everywhere. Clients hesitated, colleagues whispered, and the path to prestige he thought he had secured now seemed permanently closed. But the fallout wasn't only personal. The confrontation sparked a national conversation about the nature of the law itself. People began asking, what does it mean to truly understand justice? Is it found in memorizing precedents and reciting them by heart? Or is it found in applying wisdom, context, and humanity to every case? The answer seemed clear to anyone who had watched that day. Wisdom was the greater weapon. In churches, classrooms, and living rooms, people reflected on their own lives. How often had pride led them into battles they couldn't win? How many times had arrogance blinded them to the truth staring them in the face? Judge Judy's confrontation with the young lawyer became more than a legal showdown. It became a mirror held up to society itself. For some, it was entertaining television. For others, it was a cautionary tale. But for all who witnessed it, one thing was undeniable. In 47 seconds, Judge Judy had turned a courtroom exchange into a timeless lesson that no one would forget. In the end, those 47 seconds became far more than a courtroom exchange. They became a reminder of what truly matters when knowledge collides with wisdom. The young lawyer had every advantage: youth, memory, confidence, but none of it could withstand the weight of truth delivered by someone who had lived the law for decades. Judge Judy didn't just win an argument. She revealed a principle that resonates far beyond the legal world. Arrogance always crumbles when confronted by experience, humility, and truth. For the lawyer, it was a painful lesson. For the audience, it was unforgettable. And for Judge Judy, it was simply another day of doing what she had always done, cutting through pride to expose reality. But the real question is not about the lawyer or even Judy. It's about us. Which path do we follow when challenged? The path of pride or the path of wisdom? The answer will define far more than a courtroom case. It will define the course of our lives. If you believe Judge Judy was right to expose arrogance in that moment, hit subscribe, share this video, and tell us in the comments, was she too harsh or was it exactly what he needed to hear?